Good morning, everyone. In last session, we have seen Spring Boot application folder structure. Spring Boot application folder structure. Now, in Spring Boot application folder structure, we understood what are the files it is creating and what are the folders it is creating and what are the files it is creating for us. What are the folders it is creating and what are the files it is creating. Mainly, we need to talk about one thing that is called start class. Okay, start class. And second one, application.properties file. Second one is application.properties file. And third one unit test class is also getting created. Unit test class is getting created. Unit test class. And next one, form.xml. Form.xml file. So these are the things that mainly we can see in our boot application. Can anyone tell me what is the purpose of this start class in the Spring Boot? Can anyone tell me what is the purpose of start class in the Spring Boot? Guys, please respond.
Program execution will start from
all our Java files will be stored in the start class.
No.
Spring
It has
Boot
a main
application
it has a main class.
will start from here. Spring
Yes.
To start the application.
Main method, sir.
It has a
starting point of our application, sir.
Spring Boot application execution will start from the start class. Whenever you create a boot application, by default, one Java class will be created that is called as start class of our Spring Boot. Spring Boot application execution will begin from there only. That contains a main method that is entry point for boot application execution. Next one, application.properties file also will be available. Application.properties file also will be available. What is the purpose of this application.properties file? What is the purpose of application.properties file? Application.properties file is used to configure the properties which are required for our project. Which is used to configure the properties which are required for our project, like data source properties we want to configure. Data source properties if you want to configure, or if you want to configure Kafka properties, if you want to configure exception details, any configuration properties that are required for our application, we are going to configure in application.properties file. We are going to configure in application.properties file. Right now, next one, unit test class. What is the purpose of that unit test class? What is the purpose of that unit test class?
For test cases.
You can perform unit testing for our application.
Where we can write our JUnit code, where we will write our JUnit code. That is the unit test class. Next one, what is the purpose of form.xml?
Maven configuration or Maven dependency we can put here.
Right. So application related dependencies we are going to configure in pom.xml file. Application related configuration properties we are going to write. Application related configuration we are going to write in the pom.xml file. Maven dependencies, boot starters we are going to configure in the pom.xml. All right. Now, if we see in the last time we have created that project. Rakesh Gadam Setti, please keep your mic on mute, sir. All right. Now I have created my application. You can see pom.xml. You can see the pom.xml file here. In this pom.xml, Maven dependencies are available. Boot parent starter will be available. Then boot starter will be available. Boot starter parent available. The current version of the Spring Boot 2.4.1. Without selecting any dependencies, by default, two starters are coming for us. One is boot starter, another one is boot starter test. This boot starter provides the dependencies which are required to develop a standalone application by using Spring Boot. All right. Now, Next one, boot starter test. It provides the support to perform unit testing, to develop the unit testing components by using our Spring Boot, right? For that, starter test is available. Good. Next, look at the start class. Start class name can be anything. Start class name can be anything. Here in this, we are having a main method. Inside that, we are calling Spring application.run method. After that, we have one annotation called at Spring Boot application annotation. So this is called as main class of the Spring Boot, or people will call it as start class of the Spring Boot. That means Spring Boot application execution will begin from this main method only. As the Spring Boot, whether that application is a standalone application, or whether it is a web application, or whether it is a distributed application, this start class will be available. And that application execution will start from this start class only. Some people will treat it as, will call it as a main class, or people will call it as a start class. Anything is fine. But point that you need to remember, boot application execution will start from here, irrespective of type of the project, whether it is a web or standalone, it doesn't matter. Execution will start from here only. Now, coming to resources folder, here we have a file with a name called application.properties. Here we have one file with a name called application.properties. In this properties file, we can configure the data in the form of key and value pair. In this file, we can configure the data in the form of key and value pair. Any configuration that is required for our project can be configured here. Any configuration, nothing but database properties you can configure. Database properties you can configure. Application messages you can configure. For web application view resolver you can configure. For web application view resolver we can configure. All those details we will configure in the .properties file. Instead of .properties file, you can use .yml also. Yet another markup language standard is using in the industry nowadays, which will improve readability of our configuration properties. Either you can use .properties file or you can use .yml file also, not a problem for configuration purpose. Then test Java available. Test Java is available. The test Java is used to write the unit testing. The test Java is used to write the unit testing. And here we are having unit test class also, where it is mentioned as at boot test annotation. It represents it is a Spring Boot application test class. It represents it as a Spring Boot application test class. And here we have one method, a dummy method. For that, there is one annotation called @test annotation. @test annotation represents it is a test method. It is a test method. Boot test represents it is a test class. It is a test class. Spring Boot application annotation represents it is a start class. Spring Boot application annotation represents it is a start class. Inside that we have a main method. Inside the main method we are calling Spring application.run method. We are calling Spring application.run method. Very good. Now let me run my boot application. Right click on this project. Right click on this project, run as boot app. Right click on this project, run as boot app. Right. See the console. Application started and application terminated. Because there is no business logic here to execute. Just application started and application got terminated. Here you guys can see one logo is printing. Spring logo is printing. That is called banner in the Spring Boot. Whatever is printing, that Spring logo that is printing here, that is called banner in the Spring Boot. We can remove that banner. We can customize that banner also. Or we can add your own banner also. You can add your own banner, or you can customize that banner text, and you can stop that banner printing also. Programmer is having that flexibility. All right, that is not that much important for us, but let's see. Here, when I run my application, what is happening in the background. When I run my application, what is happening in the background? I want to understand that. In order to understand what is happening in the run method, don't buttify whatever I am teaching here today. Don't buttify them. Just explore. Just explore. Now see here, run method is getting called. Whenever application execution starts, it will start from the main method. Inside the main method, what we are doing, guys, can anyone respond? What is happening inside the main method? Please speak out.
We are
Please
calling
speak
the
out
run
what
method.
we are doing inside the main method.
Spring application is method.
We are calling spring application.run method. So can I say run method is the entry point for boot application execution?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, we can
Yes,
say run method is the entry point for boot application execution. Run method is user defined method or it is predefined method.
Predefined method.
Predefined
method.
Run is
Predefined
a
method.
predefined method. So they already developed that method inside the Spring application class as a static method. For that method, two parameters we are passing and we are calling that method by using class name Spring application.run. Now, I want to see what is there inside the run method. Can we see the logic of the predefined methods?
Yes, we can.
Can we see the logic of the predefined methods or not?
Yes, sir. We
Yes, we can
Now,
see.
I'm going to open that method. Guys, hold control button and keep your cursor. It will highlight. Open implementation. I'm pressing control button and I am keeping my mouse cursor on that. It is highlighting. Open implementation. Open implementation. Now, can you see what is happening here? See what is the return type of the run method now. Tell me what is the return type of the run method now.
New class configurable application context.
Configurable
Configure
application context object. So what is the return type of run method? Configurable application context. That configurable application context is reference of the IOC container. Configurable application context is the reference of the IOC container. So run method is returning the reference of the IOC container. Programmer needs to start the IOC container by using Bean Factory application context, or programmer no need to start that IOC container.
Programmer no need to start the IOC
No need
context.
to start the IOC
No need to
container.
start.
Now, suppose simple, if you develop a standalone application by using Spring Framework, do you need to start the IOC container by using application context, or Spring will start the IOC container automatically?
We need to start.
We need to start the
Programmer has to start it. Programmer has to start the IOC container by using Bean Factory or by using application context. By using Bean Factory or by using application context, programmer has to start the IOC container. Got it? Starting the IOC container is a one project requirement or it is a universal requirement?
It's a universal requirement.
Universal requirement. It's a universal requirement. Everybody who is developing a standalone application by using Spring Framework, they need to start the IOC container. Can I say it is a common logic that everybody writing in every project?
Yes.
Can I say it is a common logic that everybody writing in every project?
Yes,
Yes, sir. Yes,
It is a common logic that everybody writing in every project. Then pivotal team thought that, hey, why everybody has to start the IOC container required for our project? Why can't our framework will start it? Why can't framework will? We know the requirement. Why can't we start that IOC container? With that idea, as part of the run method, boot will start the IOC container also. So programmer no need to write the logic to start the IOC container. Spring Boot will start the IOC container for the programmer. Can I say it is one of the auto configuration concept? Can I say it is one of the auto configuration concept now?
Yes, we can.
What is the meaning
Yes,
of
yes.
auto configuration? It is going to guess what is required for the programmer, what is required for the application, what is required to run the application, and it is going to provide that configuration for the project. In order to run the Spring application, IOC container is mandatory. In order to run the Spring application, IOC container is mandatory. Then Spring Boot is starting the IOC container and giving the reference of the IOC container. Now tell me, what is the return type of the run method?
It's an application
Configurable
context object.
application context. What
Context
is that?
objects.
Configurable application context represents IOC container.
Container.
Now,
Represent IOC container.
inside the run method, it is calling one more run method. It is calling one more run method. Internal run method it is calling. Let me go into that method. Okay, fine. Inside that again, it is calling one more run method. One more run method. This is the actual logic that is happening inside the run method. We need to understand this logic. This is the predefined code that is available inside the run method. Now, see here, first line. You can understand. If you can read the simple English, then you can understand what is happening here. What is this?
Stopwatch.
Stopwatch. Generally, why we will use stopwatch? To calculate the time.
Time.
To calculate the time. Now, they created an object for the stopwatch and they have started the stopwatch. That means they have started a timer. Why they have started a timer is, if you see the console, what they are saying here, started the application in 3.062 seconds. That means they are calculating how much time it is taking to start the application. So in order to calculate the time, they are using stopwatch here. Stopwatch object they created, stopwatch they have started, which is used to calculate the time taken to start our application. After that, then create bootstrap context. They're creating one bootstrap context object, right? Create bootstrap context. What is there inside this method? It is loading initializers which are required for our application. Default bootstrap context, bootstrappers dot for each initializer dot initialize bootstrap context and return the bootstrap context. That means in order to run the boot application, some bootstrappers are required. Those bootstrappers it is loading and it is initializing them as part of bootstrap context. See, what are the bootstrappers? See here where it is loading. The bootstrappers get Spring Factories instances. Get factories instances. Inside the factory instances, there is a method. It is loading create Spring Factory instances, annotation aware order comparator. It is loading some annotated components which are required to start our boot application. After that, first it is creating stopwatch object and starting that watch. Then it is loading the initializers to start our application by using bootstrap context method. Then configurable application context null assigned local variable declared. Configure a headless property, then get run listeners. If any listeners are there which are required for our application, then load them. Then start those listeners. After that, application arguments it is taking, preparing the environment which is required to run our project. After that, ignore the beans information, configure ignore bean information. Whatever the beans are required, those things it is going to identify. Print banner. Whatever the logo that we are seeing on the console, that banner is printing as part of print banner method. After that, create application context. Here exactly IOC container is creating. Context is equal to create application context. This method is used to create the IOC container. Now sprint banner, go here. If banner mode is off, banner will not print. So if you set the mode of the banner as off, that banner will not be printed. Then this, if you want to customize the banner, you can load the banner on your own and you can print it. Next, very important, create application context. What is the meaning of create application context? Can anybody tell me? What is the meaning of
IOC container, create a
Creation of
application
IOC
context.
container.
creation of the IOC container? Creation of the IOC container. So IOC container is creating as part of run method. Is that statement true or not?
Yes.
IOC container is creating as part of the run method. Is my statement true or not?
True.
Yes, sir.
So programmer no need to write the logic to start the IOC container. That is taken care by run method in the Spring Boot. Now here, let me open this method and show you some details here. Create application context. application context factory dot create. They are calling some methods. They are calling some methods. Now create application context, then open implementation. Internally, application context factory dot create of this dot web application type. Okay, it is using some logic internally. Application context factory dot create application context factory dot create to create the IOC container. To create the IOC container, it is using that part. Good, good. Now, next one. Next one. Set the application startup, prepare the context, refresh the context, refresh, and stopwatch dot stop. So after IOC container got created, it is refreshing the context object, right? Preparing the context, it is refreshing the context. Then finally, it is stopping the watch. Why the watch is getting stopped? Information is already done. All the main processing, main business logic is executed. So how much time it has taken to execute this main business logic, it is going to calculate here. Up to here is called as main business logic. Stopwatch started and that stopwatch got stopped. Once that stopwatch is stopped, it will check loggers are enabled or not. Then it will print the loggers. After the listeners are going to start, then finally it will call the runners. Call runners method. In the Spring Boot, we have runners. Guys, as of now, we don't know what is runner, but simply I will give you one definition. Runners are used to execute any logic only one time once application is started. That means if you want to execute any logic only one time when the application is started, then you can go for runners concept. If you want to execute any logic only one time when the application is started, then you can go for runners. In the Spring Boot, we can see two types of runners. One is application runner, another one is command line runner. One is application runner, another one is the command line runner, right? Those runners will be called as part of the run method. Those runners also getting called as part of the run method. Is this clear for all of you?
Yes.
Good. Now, once the runners are called, then finally it is returning context object for us. It is returning context object for us. This is called bootstrapping logic of the Spring Boot. Hey, whenever you execute boot application, main method is calling. Inside the main method, run method is calling. Inside the run method, stopwatch is getting start. IOC container is creating. Listeners are creating. Context object is preparing. Runners are getting started. Finally, it is returning reference of the IOC container. That is called bootstrapping logic in the Spring Boot. Now, simple. Suppose if I comment this run method or if I happen. If I comment this run method, then what will happen? If I comment the run method, then what is going to happen, guys?
Nothing will run.
Nothing
Nothing
happens.
Nothing will happen, sir.
IOC
IOC
container
container will not be created.
Will not be started.
IOC container will start or IOC container will not start.
Will not start.
Container will not start.
IOC container will not start. Banner will print or banner will not print.
Not print. Not print.
Will not print. Context object will be created or context object will not be created.
Not created.
Runners will be called or runners will not be called.
Runners
will not be called.
Then there is any use of running this boot application or there is no use of running this boot application.
There is no use of running
No
the
use of.
application.
There is no use of running the boot application. So now tell
There is
me,
no use of-
can I ignore the run method or I should not ignore the run method call?
Should not ignore
No,
the
should
run
not
method
ignore.
call.
Not ignore.
We should
Definitely we
not-
have.
We have to call it. It's mandatory. It's
Yeah.
mandatory because so many things are happening inside the run method. So many things are happening inside the run method. If you remove that run method call, then your application will execute like a normal Java application. There is no special benefit that you are getting from the Spring Boot. Okay, guys, look at the code from 310 line number C. What is there inside the run method? You have to understand this. You have to understand this logic because normal Java code only, but it is a predefined logic. Somebody has written, we are learning this code. We are understanding it. These are called internals of the Spring Boot. How the boot is running internally. interviewer will ask you, when I run the Spring Boot application, how IOC container will create? You should, if you know this concept, then you can explain him confidently.
So we can say it's a life cycle of basically of a Spring Boot application.
Not life cycle. It is a bootstrapping.
Bootstrapping. Okay.
Yeah. Bootstrapping means starting.
Starting. Okay.
Hi sir, what is the use of listener here?
We'll tell you, sir, some listeners I will tell you which are required to load the configuration and scan the classes, represent them as Spring Beans. Those things will be done by the listeners.
Okay.
Your classes will be available in the packages, right? Somebody has to check which class is a Spring Bean, which class is not a Spring Bean. That thing will be done by the listeners. When the application started, they will listen and they will get this information which is required to run the boot project.
Hello.
Hello.
Sir, is there any life cycle methods which are associated with the start class or not?
Life cycle methods are not there.
Okay.
Sir, what's here? Prepare environment.
Prepare environment. There is a concept called profiles in the Spring Boot, sir. That is whether it should load the data from the properties file, what data it should load from the properties file. That thing will be done from the prepare environment. So you will write some database properties in the properties file or YML file. It has to load those details. That thing will done by prepare environment method.
Okay.
And sir, which
configuration property source it is using to load that data? Tell me, sir. Come on.
sir, which one gets executed first? At Spring Boot annotation or the main method?
Spring Boot annotation code will load the data. That I will come to that annotation part. I will come to that part. Then I will clarify you which one is loading first. Okay. This is not a simple annotation, guys. This one annotation is doing a lot of things internally. We need to understand them also. Yeah. Now, where this run method is available, this run method belongs to which class, guys?
Spring application.
Run method belongs to a class called Spring application, which is predefined class. Spring application is a predefined class. Now, what is the Spring application? Class that can be used to bootstrap and launch Spring application from a Java main method. Right. Now see here, a class that can be used to bootstrap and launch a Spring application from a Java main method. By default, class will perform following steps to bootstrap your application. What is the bootstrap? Create an appropriate application context instance depending on the class path. Register command line property source to expand command line argument Spring properties. Refresh the application context, loading all the singleton beans. Method to bootstrap your application. Right now, these are the common things that our main application is doing. All right, so this is the code that is there inside the boot application start class. Yep. It is available from Spring Boot version 1.0 onwards. The Spring application class available from Spring application 1.0. Okay, right. Now, inside this class, we have some methods. Those methods are calling as part of the run method. Run method is getting called whenever boot application is started. Run method is called bootstrapping method. Run method is called as bootstrapping method. Good. Now here we have one annotation. Let me open this annotation. Is it a normal annotation or it is a special annotation?
It is a special annotation.
special annotation because this is not a single annotation. This one annotation is equal to 3 annotations, right? Spring Boot configuration, enable auto configuration, and component scan. This one annotation is equal to 3 annotations in the Spring. Auto configuration, boot configuration, enable auto configuration, and component scan. What is that auto configuration and what is that component scanning, how it is working, that we are going to discuss internally in the tomorrow session. Tomorrow, we are going to debug the run method and we are going to see how this annotation is working. How this annotation is working. Guys, how many of you don't know debugging? How many of you don't know debugging?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, for
I
tomorrow.
don't know.
Yes, sir. For tomorrow class, we need the debugging concept that is very, very, very important for every programmer. So what you need to do is go here and check debugging Ashok IT. Debugging Ashok IT. So just search that in the YouTube. So you will get my wonderful video, Java code debugging in the IDE, tips and tricks. So 2 years back, I have uploaded this debugging video. So without knowing the debugging, you will not be called as a programmer. If you want to become a good programmer, if you want to become a good programmer, then you need to know this debugging. You need to know this debugging. Please today complete this debugging video and tomorrow we are going to debug our Spring Boot application. Rare stop karna abhi. Right. So now today I want all of you to complete this debugging video. Okay. For tomorrow's session, debugging is very important. If you don't know debugging, you don't understand our tomorrow's class. If you don't know debugging, you don't understand tomorrow's session, please go to the debugging video that I have sent you in the chat box now. Please bookmark it and complete that video. Right now, tomorrow we'll debug this run method and we are going to understand how these annotations are working. Tomorrow class is bootstrapping in Spring Boot. How Spring Boot applications are getting bootstrapped, what is the real purpose of the run method, and what is the real purpose of this boot application annotation, we are going to discuss. Got it? Yep. Anybody has any questions before winding up for today? Tomorrow class will start at 8:30. Tomorrow class will start at the sharp 8:30. Tomorrow will internally how code is working, we'll understand with the help of debugging. If anybody is not completed your registration process here, please do that, sir. You will get a mail from us with the class recording and class notes. Please register your details here if you are not registered already. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow.